Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Sorry, I can't be there today. However, I have left this screencastify for you guys so that you can follow along with how the lesson would be completed had I been there. Looking at our agenda for today, you see that we're going to be completing lesson 3.3. And during lesson 3.3, you can see that we're going to be analyzing evidence cards. We talked about this briefly on Monday and Tuesday. As you go through your evidence cards, I do want you to make annotations on the cards. And I'm going to kind of model this for you as I go through one of the 5 evidence cards. You're also going to be deciding whether or not those evidence cards are supporting a particular claim. Remember, at the end of chapter 1, we were able to refute or say no to claim number 1. However, we still have claim number 2, which is that much more energy was in the launcher system on Wednesday than on Tuesday. And then claim 3, which was that the magnetic force was much stronger on Wednesday than on Tuesday. As we looked at claim 3, we also saw that there was claim A and claim B. So let's just take a look at those 2 claims really quickly to see whether or not we're thinking that our claim is going to be more 3A or 3B. If we were saying that it was claim 3A, we would say that it's the magnetic force was much stronger on Wednesday because the magnets were stronger. If we're going to say 3B, we would say the magnetic force was much stronger on Wednesday because the magnetic force is stronger closer to the magnets. Take a brief moment and think about those 2 claims. Do either one of those sound more logical to you, or have we done an experiment in which we could support one of those 2 claims? Again, 3A, the magnetic force was much stronger on Wednesday because the magnets were stronger. Or 3B, the magnetic force was much stronger on Wednesday because the magnetic force is stronger closer to the magnets. If you said that 3B is making sense to you, it's because we have spent the last 2 days really investigating that. We haven't had too much time to look at claim 3A, which is talking about whether or not the stronger or weaker magnet makes a difference. And that would support whether or not from Monday to Wednesday, they switched their magnets out and we're using stronger magnets each day. We will have an opportunity to look at some evidence today with that. Now, just to refresh our memory, why did the spacecraft go so much faster than expected on Wednesday? We have on Monday our 2 magnets. Remember, this is the station, and then this is our launcher. Before the launch on Monday, they were set at 4 centimeters apart, and they only traveled 80 meters per second. Tuesday, slightly closer at 90 meters per second. And on Wednesday, they were at 2 centimeters, but now they jumped up 30 meters per second to 120 meters per second. And that was just too fast. So looking at our evidence for claim 3, the magnetic force was much stronger on Wednesday than on Tuesday. We have these 2 subclaims that we really want to make sure we dive into a little bit farther today. 3B, we've looked at those. We saw on Monday when we did our experiment, as our magnets got closer together, that launcher flew farther than when they were farther apart. There was more stored potential energy. And then on Tuesday, when we did the sim, we saw that same deal. We saw that magnetic force was stronger when we were closer to the magnets. Unfortunately, we haven't had an opportunity to really look at 3A, but again, today we're going to look at some evidence pieces for that. What's going to happen is that you're going to receive these cards in just a moment. Our USA scientists sent new data to analyze, and you're going to analyze and sort the evidence. Okay. Then you're going to select the subclaim that is best supported by the evidence. You're going to be looking at claim 2, claim 3A, and claim 3B. We're looking at all 3 of those because we're trying to decide what is the reason for our launcher flying so much faster on Wednesday than any of the other days. I do want to take a moment to just work through one with you. So if you could take your paper and flip over to the back side so that you're looking at evidence card E, we're going to work through evidence card E together. So as I'm going through the slide up on the screen with you here, I want you to be adding these annotations to your piece of paper as a model for what you're going to do with evidence card A, B, C, and D. So I'm going to start by reading evidence card E. Evidence card E reads, energy used to push spacecraft to initial position for each launch. So that's what this data is showing. It's showing how much energy was needed to push the spacecraft into that launch position. Okay. So it says during the setup process of each launch, the USA scientists recorded how much energy was required to push the spacecraft to an initial position of 4 centimeters away from the launcher. Now, you might ask why all 3 days are being tested at 4 centimeters. And the reason for that is because we're trying to isolate variables to make sure that we only have one thing that's being tested. Since we want to see whether or not the energy was different each day, this is going to allow us to see whether or not the force necessary to move against that repelling force was different. So when I look at this, I see launch date on the left. I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then you'll see for total energy to reach initial position of 4 centimeters from launcher in kilojoules, we had 320 kilojoules, 320 kilojoules, and 320 kilojoules. So just looking at that information, what I notice is that the energy necessary Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday was always the same no matter what. Energy was the same Monday, energy was the same Tuesday, energy was the same on Wednesday. So I might take my pen and I might write something. Please excuse the penmanship here. Initial and then I might say strength. The same. Okay, so take the moment to write that down again. I apologize for the penmanship here, but when I look at those, I see that the initial strength was the same every day. It required the same energy Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Okay, so I summarize. Go ahead and make sure you write that on your paper. Initial strength the same. Okay, for all 3 days. After summarizing, what I also want to start thinking about is whether or not it is supporting or refuting any of our claims. Again, looking at our 3 claims, we have claim number 2, much more energy was in the launcher system on Wednesday than on Tuesday. And then we have 3, both A and B, that the magnetic force was stronger on Wednesday because claim A, more potential energy can be stored by moving it against a stronger magnet. Or claim B, more potential stored because we're getting closer to a magnet. So as we look at our card here, when we're trying to decide whether or not it is supporting claim 2, claim 3A, or claim 3B, I apologize that my pen did erase here. What I notice is that if anything, it's not necessarily supporting anything, but it refutes 3A. 3A is saying it had to do with weak and strong magnets. But since we can see that the energy was the same each day, then every single day they were using the same magnets. We can argue that they were always using strong magnets. And so it wasn't that on Monday they had weaker magnets and Wednesday they had stronger. So we're actually going to write on our card, we're going to say refutes and it refutes 3A. So you can write that on your card as well, right? That initial energy was the same each day. Because that energy was the same, we know that it did not have to do with whether or not they switched out the magnets. Again, that's why they tested all 3 days at 4 centimeters from that launcher, because they wanted to isolate that variable to make sure that it was always going to be the same. As a result, we can refute 3A. Okay. So now when you're connecting a piece of evidence to a claim, you want to make sure that you're explaining why the evidence matters to the claim. And so when I had written down over here that the initial energy was the same each day, that's connected. That's telling why it matters for 3A. Okay. So then in this case, again, the evidence shows all 3 tests were the same. The energy required to push the spacecraft to initial position of 4 was the same. So I'm going to say that it's actually going to refute 3A, since 3A states that the magnetic force was much stronger on Wednesday because the magnets were stronger on Wednesday. But if they were, then it would have taken more energy to push against them. Since it didn't require more energy, we know that the energy or the magnets were the same. We could refute 3A. As you go through each of your 4 remaining evidence cards, I want to see you summarizing the information that is being given to you. And then I want you to be able to tell me whether or not you are supporting or refuting either claim 2 or claim 3A or 3B. At this point, you have your 4 other evidence cards. You have evidence card A, which if you flip back over and look at the front, you have distance between the launcher and the spacecraft in each launch. You have evidence card B, the average speed of the spacecraft when launched. Evidence card C, the energy used to push the spacecraft to final position for each launch. Evidence card D, simulating the launches. And they all look similar to things that we did on Monday and Tuesday, as well as days that were before. So dive into each of these cards. Remember, the whole point behind this is that later on Monday, you're going to be coming through and you're going to be writing an explanation about the sequence of events that caused the spacecraft to go much faster than expected on Wednesday. In order to do that, we have to have our evidence to support our argument. You will be using the evidence from evidence from evidence card A through E to help support you in your writing to Dr. Shapiro about what happened to our spacecraft and why it went much faster. If you have any questions, by all means, you can ask whoever is in the room. You can also ask Miss Hubley. I will be making sure she pops in to just check on you guys. Hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully you guys can dive through it. We'll check these cards in tomorrow briefly just to touch base. And then we have a look at review to complete and your assessment will start on Friday. Have a good day, everyone.